to Bad Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. And so we'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals. And then we'll spend part of the show opening a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a soundscape of gentleness and reflection and delight. And maybe of grieving. Without conservation activity and significant societal shift, many of these species may not survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their journey with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the floating quillwort. The floating quillwort is a critically endangered freshwater semi-aquatic plant native to South Africa, specifically to the Eastern Cape province, found roughly 25 miles from the coast. Its scientific name is Isoetes wormaldii, and it was first described in 1906. The floating quillwort is semi-aquatic. They root in the soft mud and silt of fairly shallow freshwater ponds, marshes, and slow streams, with leaves that grow upward through the water to the light and air above. Each plant grows roughly 50 very slender leaves that have a dark green grass-like appearance. Each leaf is like a long, flexible, slightly flattened cylindrical tube, growing roughly 9 to 18 inches tall. The floating quillwort's leaves and their leaf veins are low in lignin, which is a tissue that provides structural rigidity. So the leaves that crest the waterline do not poke upward. Instead, they lay flat on the water's surface, appearing, as their name suggests, to float. The floating quillwort is a lycophyte. This is a class of plant species of ancient lineage, dating from over 400 million years ago. We have fossil evidence of quillwort from roughly 165 million years ago, that's the Jurassic period, that appears nearly identical to their modern counterpart. Quillwort has survived, relatively unchanged, since the age of dinosaurs. But going back even farther into the lycophyte lineage to roughly 350 million years ago, in the Carboniferous and Permian periods, we find fossil evidence of arborescent lycophytes. These quillwort ancestors are gargantuan. reaching heights of up to 160 feet tall with 6-foot diameter trunks and root systems that would spread out up to 60 feet. These Lependendrales formed the canopies of our planet's earliest great forests. And then in the millennia since, changing climate conditions, selection pressures, resulted in a kind of miniaturization, a reductive evolution in which lycophytes adapted to new ecological niches by no longer committing energy to produce bark, nor a spreading canopy, and by growing smaller, from hundreds of feet tall to a dozen inches, adapting to semi-aquatic ecosystems where they faced less competition. And as such, their lineage has persisted for hundreds of millions of years as their larger ancestors went extinct. Today, modern lycophytes, like our floating quillwort, retain vestigial traits from their ancient past. Specifically, we find lingering structures in their rootstock that were once used to produce the woody tissue necessary for towering growth. This is a holdover from a few 100 million years of natural selection. Floating quillwort reproduction also evidences its historic lineage and its semi-aquatic adaptations. Unlike flowering plants, floating quillwort does not produce flowers, seeds, pollen, nor rely on pollinators. Instead, floating quillwort reproduces through the production and release of two kinds of tiny spores, megaspores and microspores, both smaller than 25 thousandths of an inch, smaller than, say, a grain of table salt. Megaspores, which are the larger female reproductive structure, contain the egg, and the smaller microspores become male sperm. The released spores are dispersed by hydrochory, that's water, and perhaps by zoochory, that's animals. The microspores become male sperm, and that sperm is motile. It's capable of spontaneous, independent, though undirected movement. It swims in the waters of the floating quillwort's habitat. And if it happens upon a female macrospore egg, fertilization occurs. Additionally, the floating quillwort may rely on animals for reproductive success. The mechanism here is not entirely clear, but the South African National Biodiversity Institute reports on a conservation program which, concerned about grazing pressures, removed livestock from the habitat of a floating quillwort subpopulation. But after the livestock was excluded from the wetland, the quillwort population plummeted. And so the report concludes that the trampling of the wetland may aid in spore dispersal, playing a role in successful quillwort reproduction. This too may be a kind of holdover adaptation from a time when megafauna like water buffalo or hippopotamus roamed this region. Additionally, and perhaps relatedly, floating quillwort reproduction relies on the long-term viability of their spores. Their habitat has ecosystem fluctuations in which the wetlands and ponds of their habitat will dry up. And without water, quillwort sperm cannot reach egg, so the spores, during unfavorably arid conditions, will remain dormant, building up in a stored spore bank in the dry pond bed, but remaining viable, to be then activated again when water returns, facilitating the possibility of fertilization. Studies have documented stored spore bank viability for as long as 6 years. In the dream, I dream of what we keep, what we hold close in memory in our bodies. Ghost echoes in our roots, of the route from then to now. Shadows of yesterdays we cling to through tomorrows. In the dream. The floating quillwort is native to the far southeastern tip of the African continent, to the country of South Africa, to the Eastern Cape province, near the city of Makanda. This region is known as the Albany Hotspot, a convergence of 6 distinct temperate and subtropical biomes where unique ecosystem conditions support a rich assortment of plant and animal diversity, many species found nowhere else on Earth. The floating quillwort is restricted to a tiny sliver of this habitat, occurring in 3 to 4 subpopulations only in an area of about 1/2 a square mile. This is a grassland thicket of seasonal wetland, pool, and stream. In the winter months, it is a dusty, undulating, sandy clay landscape with patches of scrub and grass. But when the summer rains arrive, the clay soil is slow to drain, and the lower depressions fill with water, creating seasonal wetlands, temporary ponds, and slow waterways in which our quillwort thrives. The weather here is fairly dry and mild. Summer highs average in the low 80s Fahrenheit, winter lows in the upper 40s Fahrenheit. Annual precipitation averages 27 inches, most of which is concentrated in the summer months. Floating quillwort share their home near Makanda with African honeysuckle, wild pomegranate, common slug eater, African clawed frog, tarwood, African plum, shoddy ragwort, Cape aloe, white ironwood, plain tiger butterfly, wild peach, sweet thorn, Cape four-striped grass mouse, common bracken, sagewood, Cape honeysuckle, bitterleaf, eastern leopard toad, plains zebra, brown hooded kingfisher, white-starred robin, black wattle, cabbage tree, licorice plant, collared sunbird, hairy golden orb weaving spider, and many, many more. Both historically and today, the floating quillwort's population is threatened by human habitat destruction and encroachment. Development, urban sprawl, and agriculture has cleared, built over, drained, and filled in the temporary wetlands of the quillwort's native habitat. Human encroachment has also displaced the megafauna that may play a role in their reproductive success. And the floating quillwort's very small population makes it vulnerable to stochastic events, say a drought, or a new disease, or an aggressive developer, where a single event or phenomenon could rapidly lead to extinction. And human-induced climate change, resulting from persistent over-reliance on fossil fuels, is an imminent threat. Global warming is resulting in overall hotter temperatures and longer dry seasons in this region. And while our quillwort is well adapted for fluctuations in wet and dry seasons, extended drought imperils their reproduction. As of 2018, the floating quillwort is included in the Eastern Cape Biodiversity Conservation Plan, which requires impact assessments for further habitat development. Note, this is not full legal protection, though, and impact assessment may not necessarily deter future construction in the quillwort's habitat. The floating quillwort has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 2010, and their population is currently in decline. Our most recent counts estimate that less than 45 floating quillwort remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the floating quillwort was compiled from Freshwater Biology, Volume 69, from F.D. Freehan's doctoral dissertation from the University of California at Berkeley, from iNaturalist, from BMC Ecology and Evolution, Volume 22, Number 32, from the Botanical Journal of the Linnean Society, from The Vegetation of South Africa, Lesotho, and Swaziland, from the Ferns of South Africa, from the South African Journal of Science, Volume 99, Numbers 9 and 10, from the South African National Biodiversity Institute, from the IUCN, from Nature Communications, Volume 12, from PLOS ONE, Volume 15, Number 6, and from Wikipedia. So here in a moment, I would like to improvise some music in hopes of making space to be in contemplation of the other beings with whom we share our earth, like floating quillwort. I do not intend to force meaning upon or extract meaning from the floating quillwort, Instead, I want this music to simply express my deep awe for all life. So I will pause in the space of sound and reflection, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the floating quillwort. I will commit its name to my record. I'm so grateful to have shared time on our planet with this ancient being. And I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. I grieve. So in the name of the floating quillwort, I pledge to reduce my consumption, my carbon footprint, and my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of plant and animal kin and their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I forever pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin.